My name is Trevor Brisbane. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a minister here at Humber Valley. It's really great to see you. If you're watching online, I'm so glad you clicked on that thumbnail. In the same way, Jesus embodies the divine dream for the world. Together, Humber Valley United Church is seeking to be a living expression of justice, compassion, and belonging now and into the future. By show of hands, just wonder, who's heard that before? All right, half-ish. Which is, if you haven't heard that before, a fair, totally fair game. We just sort of unveiled this last Sunday as what we're calling our North Star. We're not kind of seeing it as a mission statement or a vision statement as much as a directional commitment for who we as a faith community want to become. If you weren't here last Sunday, maybe jump onto our YouTube channel, and if you don't mind, maybe go back and listen to last week's talk. We had some technical difficulties with the live stream, but I talked to my iPhone in my office this week and put the talk up at least, because I think it'll give you it's important, like, foundational stuff for what we're going to be talking about over the next number of weeks and who we are becoming in this next season of our life as a church. Last week was all about Jesus, which hopefully we can say that every week, right? Who we are as a community, who we are as a people and a church, always stems from our commitment to emulate the way of Jesus. That's what the first bit of that statement is about. In the same way, Jesus embodies the divine dream for the world. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, the sun is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of God's beauty. See, Christianity's radical claim is not that Jesus is like so godly. It's not that Jesus is so much like God. The radical claim of Christianity is that God is exactly like Jesus. The empire subverting, power disrupting, radically including, cross-carrying Jesus is what the God of the universe is like. So we want our lives to ooze the things that oozed from the person of Christ. Justice, compassion, belonging. And over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about how we want each one of these things to form and inform our becoming. Justice. I think probably one of my favorite definitions of justice, I don't remember where I heard it, but it's not from me, is justice is what love looks like out loud. Isn't that beautiful? Justice is what love looks like out loud. Now, here's an interesting thing about justice. It's not something we tend to think about until we're confronted with its absence. If I pulled out a bag of M&Ms, the theme is chocolate, apparently, this morning. If I pulled out a bag of M&Ms, I'd be willing to bet that, like, no one in this room was thinking about M&Ms until you saw this bag, right? Like, no one's sitting there daydreaming, Trevor, make this short because I really need M&Ms. But as soon as you see M&Ms, you become aware of M&Ms. I think the same thing is true about, say, Taylor Swift. You're probably not thinking about Taylor Swift. Okay, some of us are thinking about Taylor Swift. But then you see a picture of Taylor Swift, and now she's on the radar. So when do we think about justice? Because our relationship with justice is different than that. When things are fair, when people are treated with dignity, when justice is present, you don't really think or talk about justice. You think about M&Ms and Taylor Swift. But the moment you don't see justice or fairness, when we experience the lack of justice, when we witness injustice, isn't it true that's when we become imminently aware of its lack? It's kind of like oxygen. None of us think about breathing until we struggle for breath. Same with food, or water, or shelter. You don't think about them until you experience a lack of them. See, justice is so primal, the need for justice so innate to our human experience, our very bodies and brains are programmed to pay attention the second we sense justice is absent, like air, or water, or food. A world without air suffocates. A world without water dehydrates. A world without food starves. A world without justice destroys itself. Judy, would you come and read the morning passage for us? I've invited Judy Smith to come and read for us from Psalm 85.
Psalm 85. You, Lord, showed favor to your land, and you restored the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave the iniquity of your people and covered all their sins. You set aside all your wrath and turned from your fierce anger. Restore us again, God our Savior, and put away your displeasure towards us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger through all generations? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your unfailing love, Lord, and grant us your salvation. I will listen to what God the Lord said. God promises peace to God's people, God's faithful servants, but let them not turn to folly. Surely God's salvation is near those who fear God, that God's glory may dwell in our land. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. The Lord will indeed give what is good, and our land will yield its harvest. Righteousness goes before God and prepares the way for God's steps. This is the word.
Thanks, praise God. Thanks, Judy. That last line, righteousness goes before God and prepares the way for God's steps. Whenever in the Hebrew Scriptures you read the word righteous, we want to be careful that we don't sort of associate it with this idea of like self-righteous, like a holier-than-thou posture, because that's not the connotation at all. Righteousness in the Hebrew Scriptures is like when the world is right. When things are right in the world. When the world's power and politics and economies, when the world's structures are in right relationship to God's divine dream for our world. Righteousness is justice. When things are operating the way they ought to. So you could take that last line and say, justice goes before God and prepares the way for God's steps. If you want to know which way God is going, move in the direction of justice. If you want to know what God's doing, justice is always the direction of the divine. In the same way, Jesus embodies the divine dream for the world. Together, Humber Valley United Church is seeking to be a living expression of justice, compassion, and belonging, now and into our future. So let's talk about justice. If you were to walk into any courthouse in our country, I suspect you'd probably see some version, whether it's a painting or a statue, but some version of Themis. Do you know who Themis is? You've seen Themis, right? Lady Justice. She's the Greek goddess of justice and the law. Yet most Western justice systems have sort of appropriated her to be the personification of what we want our justice systems to represent. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about Famous because I think, if you've spent much time in Canada, you've grown up, or in the West, with this picture of Famous as the personification, the embodiment of justice. So I want to make 3 observations. First, you'll notice about Famous, she's holding scales. She's holding them out because she wants to make sure you see these scales. She's like, this is justice. The scales of justice. Justice is where we weigh what's good versus what's bad. It's where we weigh the right versus the wrong, the innocent versus the guilty. This is what we think of when we think about justice. Who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's the victim, who's the perpetrator. You weigh it all out. You make a judgment. The scales of justice are all about evaluation. Now, in order to be able to evaluate who's good and who's bad, you have to have some sort of parameters or criteria. The only way you can determine who the bad guy is to have some set of rules by which the good people play by. So those who play by the rules are the good guys, and those who break the rules or break the laws, we call the bad guys. So the scales of justice are really about evaluation. They measure, did you break the rules? Did you step outside the bounds? Did you violate the laws? Because that would make you bad. And the best way to treat the bad guys is to punish them, Famous tells us. That's part of what our justice system does. If someone punches you, it's like the scales are all out of whack. But somehow it just, let's be honest, feels better, feels more satisfying if you get to punch them back, right? Not that any of us are going around punching people, but metaphorically, of course. Right? Justice is like if somebody punches you, you can punch them back. That levels the scales. I mean, the earliest part of the Christian and Jewish tradition refer to this. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Like if somebody takes your eye, take their eye. And somehow it just feels like the world is back to right. Someone knocks out your tooth, you should knock out their tooth. And then everything about the scale sort of comes back in line. Until Jesus comes along and he says, wait a minute, no, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but truly I say unto you, bless those who persecute you. Do good to those who harm you. Like somebody knocks out your tooth, bless them. Don't seek revenge. Don't seek to even that primal scale that we might feel of being. See, Jesus is not so interested in leveling the scale as he is about unleashing wholeness and dignity and love. So if someone punches you, it feels better to punch them back. But then what if you don't have enough power or strength to punch them back? We would say, well, that's okay, don't worry, the justice system, Famous, will get back at them by putting them in jail or putting them on probation or house arrest. Some kind of retribution is waiting to level the scales. Question. Is it possible that Christianity has become more enthralled with the scales of Famous than with the teachings of Jesus? A lot of Christianity has become all about evaluation, right? All about judgment. If you were to head down to Bloor Street after a service, after the barbecue today, and you were just to randomly go up to some people and ask, hey, can I just ask you a quick question? Who would you say are the judgiest people around? I think that's probably how they would answer too. And it makes sense. right? It makes sense that Christians have sort of earned this reputation for judginess. We're quick to judge people's beliefs. We've kind of made it a brand to judge people's sexual orientation or gender expression. We're quick to judge if somebody swears. What else? Like I'm asking you, this is not rhetorical. What else are we kind of, well, let's say Christians known to be judgy about? What do we judge people for? Addiction, yeah. Sorry? Morality, yeah. Life choices. Your life choice is different than mine, so I evaluate you. Sexuality. Family history. Money, sorry, I heard money. Single parent, yeah, marital status. Not divorce. There's all kinds of things. But here's the thing. If your mental picture of God is as a judge, sitting up in heaven, weighing your good deeds versus your bad deeds, if your mental picture of God is a judge getting ready to sort souls where the good guys go to heaven and the bad guys go to hell, if God is a judge and your job is to be godly, it makes sense that your primary concern would be evaluation. Should it be any surprise that evaluation and judginess is what we've sort of become known for? Unless we say maybe that's not what the narrative is really about. Maybe the story of God incarnating in the person of Jesus to love and redeem the world is not a story about evaluation, but it's a story about restoration. Maybe God's not some judge who's out there to get us, but a creator who's relentlessly pursuing us, that we might co-create with God the rightness of this world. Psalm 85, which Judy just read, hits a crescendo in verse 13. Justice goes before God and prepares the way for God's steps. So in other words, justice is coming. Justice is on the way. So what's it going to look like? Verse 1, the Lord showed favor to your land. There's something about justice that's connected to the land. Verse 11, faithfulness springs forth from the earth. Verse 12, our land will yield a harvest. Justice is inherently ecological. There can be no justice as long as we exploit the earth. Then verse 1, you restored the fortune of Jacob. Justice has to do with economies, reparations. Verse 4, restore us again. It's like move us from where we are to where we ought to be. Take us from who we are to who we could be. Verse 6, will you not revive us again, God, that your people may rejoice in you. Move us into a way of being in this world that brings joy for all, well-being to everyone. Verse 10, righteousness and peace kiss each other. How beautiful and intimate is that picture of mutuality? People aren't trying to hurt those they disagree with, but care about them and connect with them. Psalm 85 paints a picture of justice that is radically different than scales and evaluation and measuring each other. Justice is ecological. It's economic. It's about well-being and restoration. It's wanting this world to function on all levels, from power balances and imbalances to the way we treat our world, everything working the way God imagined. Justice is love lived out loud. See, this is exactly why we frame our North Star firmly in the life of Jesus. If we let famous sort of dictate our picture of justice, then our Christianity and our economics and our politics and our center will always turn into judging and evaluating and measuring each other. Jesus doesn't hold scales to evaluate. He bears a cross to forgive. I said there were three things I wanted to point out, and I went really long with that first one, so let's just bang through these second ones, these next two really quick. She's holding scales. It might be hard to tell, but can you see what she has on her face? A blindfold. She's wearing a blindfold. It's to symbolize that justice should be blind, should be impartial. Justice should be without bias. We shouldn't judge people just by looking at them. Cover your eyes to see everyone that is treated equal. Weigh the evidence is the idea, unbiasedly. But what if the blindfold is actually one of the biggest barriers to the vision of restoration and wholeness that justice is intended to be? What if the only chance we have for justice in this world is not claiming that we can somehow be impartial or unbiased, but acknowledging where we do hold our bias and our stereotypes and our prejudices? What if what this world really needs is not more people covering their eyes, claiming objectivity, and that they see the truth from where they're situated? But what if what we are desperate for is for people who are willing to open their eyes and with humility admit that they do hold a bias? That all of us are situated in a culture and a race and a social vantage point that is never impartial. What if it's only when we're willing to look at each other in the eye and see each other, know each other? It's only then, not when we cover our eyes, but look at each other, that any chance of God's beautiful vision of justice is possible. I've talked about this before, but when I was living in Los Angeles, I got to spend some time at a place called Homeboy Industries. It was started by a Roman Catholic priest who's just amazing, and it's sort of established to take LA's countless gangbangers and give them a way off the street life, the thug life. These were two of the guys that I got to hang out with, and they didn't tell me everything that they had done or been involved in, but they told me enough to know that if you've got your blindfold on and you're holding the scales, they should probably be in jail for a long, long, long time. But when you sit with them and you walk with them and you have a plate of nachos with them, you very quickly begin to discover that they're incredible human beings, really bright young men who never wanted to be in a gang. Nobody chooses to go into a gang. A gang is your last resort in a world where you feel like you have no other option. So rather than locking these people away, Homeboy Industries is advocating jobs, not jails. Let's give these guys jobs, let's give them dignity, let's give them opportunity, let's give them a future. Let's see them for who God made them to be, rather than just people we ought to lock up. See, justice isn't blind. It can't be blind. Justice is taking the blindfold off and seeing the humanity and indescribable worth, even of our enemies. And the last thing for today, and then we'll go eat hot dogs and throw each other in the dunk tank, is, can you see what Famous is holding in her hand? She's got a scale in one hand. What's in the other hand? A sword. Makes sense, right? Until you read that story where Jesus is in the garden and he's about to be arrested in the most unjust arrest in human history. I mean, he's done nothing but preach love and inclusion and hope and well, he's undermined the political agenda of the empire. So they come to arrest him. And while they're doing that, Peter, Jesus' best friend, takes out a sword and he attacks one of the soldiers, wounds him in the ear. Jesus looks to Peter, and what does he say? Peter, put down your sword. Drop your sword. And then Jesus doesn't give a teaching or a lecture or even a soundbite on why nonviolence is the answer. Jesus' first instincts are to go over and touch the head of the wounded soldier and heal him. Set things right. The rightness of the world, the rightness of another person, the dignity and the respect that everyone deserves. Jesus brings healing. God's vision for the world being made right can never be achieved with a sword. It never comes through violence. Violence is always the antithesis of what God is doing in our world. God wants to heal the world, never hurt people. The moment you pick up a sword or a gun or a weapon or clench a fist to fight for justice is the moment we stop embodying the way of Jesus. In the U.S., you often hear people say, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I say, what a lack of imagination. The only thing that can bring us closer to the world that God dreams of is a world where we rid ourselves of technologies used to harm each other. Jesus never picked up a sword to kill. He picked up a cross to die. Friends, what if God's vision of justice is not famous, but Jesus? Not scales and blindfolds and swords, but tables and crosses and washing each other's feet. It's not evaluation, it's restoration. Restoring a world where all belong, where all are valued and everyone is seen with insurpassable worth God created them for. To live for justice is to work for a world with proper power balances and well-being for all creation. So in the same way that Jesus embodies the divine dream for the world, together, Humber Valley is seeking to be a living expression of justice, compassion, and belonging, now and into the future. And this